Okay, thanks for that plug, Wendy, and thanks again to Claire. We're very pleased that the lost prodigal son from Partfour has appeared, but like several of us, he wasn't that clear on the directions. The directions just had a number, and so he took a little time to locate them. Massimo, we're really glad that you made it. So Massimo is the head of the Partfour unit responsible for HIV, hepatitis, TB, and sexually transmitted infections. First decade of this century, he worked with WHO, and this decade, I hope he will be in the Caribbean. He's a wonderful asset. It's not just to the Caribbean, to the Americas as a whole. And he has vast experience, Southeast Asia, Africa, and also Europe. So Massimo is going to talk to us about elimination of multi-channel transmission.
Thank you very much, Peter. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm really pleased I had a bite of tropical Amsterdam this afternoon. Getting back and forth to the boathouse. Very nice walk, but anyway, very glad to be here. So let me give a word of thanks to the organizers, to Jessica, whom I still do not know, but you are Jessica. And so, very many thanks for the opportunity to share a few words and a few highlights on a topic that has really gathered a lot of attention, a lot of interest. It has been a great, and it continues to be a great catalyst to action in the region. And it has also moved into a real success stories beyond the individual achievements of some specific countries, and we will see in detail which ones are the champions. But I do believe it's a real success stories for the Caribbean as a region, and by extension also by the whole region, Latin America and the Caribbean. So I'll take you quickly through a little bit of a contextualization, where do we come from with this initiative, then a little bit of the specifics of the progress, a few data indicators, how do we measure, how do we define our success, what have we learned, and then the way forward, because we obviously we won't let it go, and we are already building up an expanded platform onto these achievements. So, as mentioned, it's a long way actually, because the Caribbean, I do believe, although I am relatively new to the region, but I do believe, and I picked up quickly the sense, that the Caribbean is a region where challenges are welcome, where innovation is really seriously taken, and a region that has a long history of achievements, particularly in the elimination of vaccine-preventable diseases. So, kind of a workshop. I really like the definition of the Caribbean and Latin America, a living workshop for innovation. That's why already in the mid-90s, the region of the Americas as a whole had already gathered and agreed upon an ambitious target of eliminating congenital syphilis, mid-90s. And it took more than a decade for WHO to steer a global reflection and agree on basically the same, to drive the world to the elimination of congenital syphilis. We do have the technology, we do have the treatment, we do have since long ago the know-how, but all of us, we know how much we were lagging behind in terms of containing that easily preventable and certainly candidate to eliminate condition, which continues to be, by the way, one of the leading causes of fetal death. So in 2010, once again, the region was first to put together ideas, but galvanized by the great results of the many studies showing that PNTCT was actually working, and it was working increasingly well, running from the simple options, the monoprophylaxis, to the dual, and then eventually into the triple therapy for not only for prevention but also for treatment. So, capitalizing on that, in 2010, member states gathered, as they usually do once a year in September in Washington, D.C., and they all agreed around the idea of launching a new initiative. At that time, we called that the Dual Elimination Initiative, bringing together pediatric or vertical transmission of HIV together with congenital syphilis, as candidates to elimination. That was a 5-year initiative. It was crafted, it was launched by that time, and then the year after, the global level also reacted and developed a global plan for the elimination of mother-to-child transmission in high-burden countries. Unfortunately, none of those were in the work plan. None of those included in the work plan is actually from the region, because there's no real high-burden country in Latin America and the Caribbean. Obviously, by African and by standards of countries and settings where HIV is having really a very major public health impact. 2015 was the end of the phase 1 of our dual initiative, and then we renamed as EMTCT. And that also is the year in which Cuba became the first ever country to be validated for the achievement of those targets. And as you all know, it was really a big impact, success story. 2016 started with a new phase. I will take you there later on, and we will see what meanwhile happened last year as well. Now, the context in which this found a very favorable domain is not only the nature of innovation, the availability of a region to pick up on challenges and innovation, but also the fact that, and this is particularly true in the Caribbean, high prioritization to mother and child health services, which is reflected in this chart. We have very good data. These are estimates, but data are available indeed. And as you can see, and this trend is for 2015, but if you go backwards and you look at data from previous years, the trend is pretty flat. The very large majority of women do actually attend ANC services, as it is defined in the second bar on the left, with at least one ANC visit attendance. But if you go even further to maintain continuity through a pregnancy, and that's the next bar, you see that still 90% or in excess of 90% of pregnant women do actually consult at least or more than 4 times during pregnancy. And finally, the large majority of women deliver not necessarily at hospitals in terms of facilities, but certainly in attended conditions with skilled personnel assisting their delivery. This is a little bit the context in which we felt that integrating HIV services into MCA packages would be a winner. And that's basically the thinking behind the conception of the dual elimination initiative, to give the HIV traction, which was still and still is pretty high, to what was a little bit dormant in terms of congenital syphilis elimination. From 1995, there hadn't been too much progress. But when HIV came into the picture with the dual elimination, the trend really moved at a different pace. How do we define the elimination of mother-to-child transmission? We know there's quite a number of definitions in terms of elimination, eradication, and it depends how you look at it. Our definition is elimination as a public health threat, realizing that today we do not have all available means to eliminate HIV. We don't have a cure, and we still do not have a vaccine. Despite all these limitations, I think we've been able to drive really certain ways of transmission down to the bare minimum. And that's how we define it, an NTCT rate of 2%, or if you want to think in terms of caseload, less than 0.5 cases 0.3 cases new pediatric HIV infections per 1,000 live births, or in the case of syphilis, 0.5 cases of congenital syphilis per 1,000 live births. We do not limit our measuring to the impact indicators, but we also maintain very strongly the coverage. Those results are only achievable if provision of services comes to a very high level of coverage. And that's clear. It's a 95% or beyond 95% across the board in terms of attendance to the ANC services, in terms of coverage of testing, in terms of accessing antiretroviral therapy, no longer prophylaxis, but just plain therapy, and then treatment of seropositive mothers for syphilis. Once all those targets are met, then we are considering and we are encouraging countries to apply for validation. Now, what did we do from our organization in supporting this incredible regional drive? We set up a regional secretariat immediately after the approval of the dual initiative, So we do not have a very large team in the Pan American Health Organization, but we have ensured to have at least one full-time dedicated staff available for this very topic. We set up also a regional validation committee. We created that committee to start looking at what was emerging in 2014 as a pool of countries that were approaching. We had been monitoring their progress, their data, and we knew there was a group of countries approaching the targets. We set up the committee. The committee was led, it has been led over the last, since inception until last year, by Dr. Merceline Regis. Some of you may know her. She was also awarded as a public health hero by our director, Dr. Carissa Etienne, in May this year, in recognition of many of her merits, some of them related to the contribution to these activities. We also developed a standard regional validation methodology with a clearly defined process with steps and a number of additional indicators and orientation steps for applicant countries. And that document eventually was shared, transmitted to our colleagues in Geneva, and it greatly informed the development of what then became a global guidance, as well as the establishment of a global validation committee for HIV and syphilis. Finally, we produced also a number of tools, a number of technical documents. They're all available online on our website. And final point, we have been monitoring from very close the progress of this dual elimination initiative by publishing every year, if not a fully developed report, an update. So keep monitoring the progress and keep reporting the results has been really one of the key to the success of this initiative. So this is the progress over the last few years in terms of coverage of testing and coverage of treatment for syphilis in pregnant women. And as you can see, rates speak by themselves. So we are now at a relatively stable and fairly high level for both. Still, there is room for improvement. We all know those are the most difficult miles when you have to fill on those residual percentage points. But the level achieved seems to be stabilizing and definitely is pretty high. This is in terms of HIV testing services. Historically linked testing and counseling. Nowadays we prefer to define more comprehensively HIV testing services. This has been greatly influenced by the introduction of rapid tests. I must say that although we do not have very defined, very clear data, there's still a little bit of a resistance to a wider introduction and wider use of rapid tests, but the rapid test has come into the day-to-day practice of the region. We do not have yet data for 2016 and 17. Preliminary indication is that probably that 2015 might have been a blip or might have been a difficulty in the reporting system. This very indicator used to be included in the UNAIDS online reporting system again. It's no longer, and that might be one of the explanations to document this kind of difficulty in the reporting or a little bit of reporting fatigue. We hope it's not a decline in the coverage of testing. This slide shows you the access to antiretroviral therapy among positive pregnant mothers in blue, and the red bars are showing our estimated rate of mother-to-child transmission, which, as you can see, has declined over the years, almost half of what it was in 2010, whereby the coverage of ART has obviously grown up significantly. Again, seems to be plateauing now, and that is a call to attention. We don't want to let that level of coverage to stay in that zone. It should really definitely go up. Fortunately, there's a number of women probably lost to follow up in that sense, and that's the reason of that seemingly decline. This is an estimate that shows in green the number of new HIV, pediatric HIV infections as a result of vertical transmission from infected mothers. And in blue, since the introduction of PNTCT, blue bars indicate the number of new pediatric HIV infections averted. And if you sum up the blue bars, you probably will end up with several thousand children who have been prevented from being infected from HIV. Certainly a minor contribution to the response, to the overall response to HIV, but definitely a great achievement in terms of child pediatric care. Now, a few words on validation. We have organized our validation to be as rigorous a process as possible, and we have structured the activities of a validation into 4 blocks. One is looking at the data. Anything related to data, to impact, to coverage of services would go into that review. Second is programs and services, to define in what context. Is it in isolation? Is it in full integration, as we do hope? How do those services are being provided? Great attention has been paid, of course, to laboratory. How is testing? Is it testing quality control? It was mentioned in the previous presentation. Point of care is great, rapid testing is good, but it is as good as it is quality controlled and linked to an overall quality assessment program. And finally, we have paid a lot of attention to contextualize also the achievements in a perspective of human rights, promotion and compliance. Remember, the first country we went out to validate was Cuba, and Cuba had been repeatedly criticized for not being compliant with human rights standards. It has been oftentimes singled out as a bad example. I remember when I was in Geneva in the early years of ART, Cuba still maintained the position of putting all their patients in isolation in a sanitarium. That's no longer the case. But nevertheless, we paid definitely great degree of attention and scrutiny to that. We brought a lawyer, we brought human rights activists. Those people have gone out, they interacted extensively with civil society organizations and groups in Cuba. And then altogether we developed a methodology to assess and to define that dimension of health and human rights promotion and compliance. What are the countries that have achieved validation? I'm very proud to say that out of the 8 countries that to date have been validated by WHO worldwide for achieving the goals and the targets of the dual elimination, 7 are actually in the region of the Caribbean. And I do believe this is really an extraordinary success for the region. Over the list. Cuba was the first in 2015, and it was really a very good timing because remember, 2015 was the year in which the Obama administration decided to re-establish diplomatic links with Cuba. We all hoped that was the beginning of a new season. It seems to be a bit in a not so good shape at the moment, but the result, at least from our perspective, in public health have been great. 6 other countries and territories joined last year. They were validated in 2017, and we had an extraordinary celebration of World AIDS Day last year at the beginning of December. What have we learned collectively from this first phase and the achievements in the validation? The first is definitely HIV has been a catalyst. I was telling you earlier how stagnant was the response and the progress in congenital syphilis. When HIV came into the picture, that really created and generated a lot of traction. Obviously, and needless to say, all these things happen only and when there is a very strong, decisive political commitment. We had a huge ranking of ministers, health ministers. We had the Prime Minister in St. Kitts and Nevis to participate in the ceremony, and they gave really the highest political public visibility to the achievement and to the event. Under those conditions, these things, these results are achievable. The political commitment translates into robust interprogrammatic cooperation and synergy and integration. If you have a strong message from leadership, obviously people at the technical level, people who have responsibilities, act along those lines, and that is another key to the success. This initiative is a masterpiece, I believe, of public health in action, because all ingredients that you see listed there do actually play to create the environment and to create the possibility for those achievements. I already mentioned the great dimension of human rights, compliance and promotion that is carried on and accompanied this initiative since the beginning. And finally, I think we have achieved in making ENTCT become a marker of quality to define the good quality of MCH services at large. Still, there's a long way to go. Not all countries have achieved the same level of coverage, of impact targets, etc. But nevertheless, we continue, and we decided to continue along the same lines, but picking up more on the concept of integration and expanding therefore this platform. And we have added 2 more conditions that have come into the radar screen of elimination by 2030, if not earlier. And those are Chagas disease, which is endemic not all over the country. I don't think it is a major concern or a no concern for the Caribbean. It certainly is in many Latin American countries. But then I am also referring to hepatitis B, which is definitely a concern, but also a possible achievement in the majority of countries in the region. This is a quick summary overview of the new initiative. We haven't changed any of the targets, of the impact targets regarding HIV and syphilis, but we have added, and you can see the levels for hepatitis B are extremely low. Less equal or less to 0.1% seroprevalence among children between the age of 4 to 6. Another great success story, this time Peter referring to the vaccination campaigns and immunization at large in the Caribbean. That's it. Thank you very much for your attention.
It's really encouraging and good to know that the Caribbean is leading the world with the elimination of multi-child transmission. However, I think we are still just under 30% of all countries, so we still have a good way to go. We have time for a couple of quick questions.
Yeah, thank you. PAHO and the WHO always have very clear and good data, which are easily accessible. I wonder, because the Caribbean area is in many places, is all the data gathered from all the islands, or are there some central islands which give the data? This is what I always wonder. How's that here?
No, here for once there's no extrapolation or no proxy. All these are data coming from individual countries. That's why we have been monitoring the progress of this initiative since 2011, and countries have gradually grown into the practice of reporting on a yearly basis, being also greatly facilitated by the online platform provided by UNAIDS.
So do you see a lot of difference between the countries? Because in other data, we do see a lot of HIV data, risk groups and so forth. There's a lot of difference between the islands. How's that in this case?
Well, we continue to prefer to keep a regional picture because that shows more on the positive side, and it is also a way to encourage countries that maybe are not still lagging behind compared to those who have achieved the full elimination. There's obviously heterogeneity across countries, but the good news is that even countries that find it more difficult and more challenging have shown great commitment, political interest, and progress. So a long way to go, but I think we are on the right direction.
Okay, I think our section is out of time, but Massimo, I'm sure that you saw the letter in the Lancet calling on WHO to look at the elimination of HTLV1 in the Caribbean and elsewhere. So I don't want to open that discussion now, but I've raised it before. Success breeds more work, and of course with health we're always striving to go further. So the Caribbean has done very important research in relation to HTLV1. It's a real problem. So that's another area we're hoping to add on to that. Maybe in a couple of years, and once we hit over 50% or 60% of the countries. Okay, thanks Massimo. And I would like to thank all the 4 speakers. Really excellent presentations, giving us an idea of the very rich and outstanding work being done throughout the Caribbean. Now, I think, Jessica, you're still going to want to take a short break, maybe reduce it from 10 to 7 minutes. I think people need to stretch a little bit before Yeah, 5 to 10 minutes. A Caribbean 5 minutes. 10 minutes.